Hello, friends. Welcome to week 6 of the Anti-Bootcamp. So, you guys, can you believe it? This is the final week of the Anti-Bootcamp reset. And this week, we are going to be getting into something that I call the cycle strategy. So far, what we have been doing is laying down the groundwork for metabolic flexibility. So before we go any further, I actually just want you to think about that word for a second. Think about the word flexibility. What does that mean to you? So what it means to me is the opposite of rigidity, right? So the opposite, kind of like the whole point of the anti-bootcamp, the opposite of white knuckling, of buckling down, and most importantly, of never changing. So when we are rigid, we are inflexible, we are not changing. And when we're thinking about flexibility, I actually think about flow, a flow state, where you are actually constantly in some state of motion and changing and really adapting, right? So as humans and as women in particular, it is not how our bodies are designed to lock into one state and then rigidly just stay there. And particularly for women really past adolescence, right? Past 12, 13, 14, we get into a state of cycling every single month. Humans in general, we go through cycles during the course of a year. Women, we cycle every single month. Our hormones look different every single day. And then of course we have our life cycles. We have a fertile stage, we have a perimenopause stage, we have a menopause stage. Those are just all ways that our bodies are naturally including that flexibility. So we really have that built in. And when we are trying to be rigid and inflexible, which is how a lot of programs are designed, here's the one way that you're going to do this, and you're going to do it this one way forevermore, or at least until the end of some particular program, which is usually when everyone's like, take the deep breath. Phew, I'm glad I'm done with that one, right? That's why most programs fail, because they don't restore metabolism. They only increase that rigidity for a short amount of time. So we're just thinking if we just are super rigid and super buckled down for a short amount of time, we're going to get some sort of result. But the truth is that does not restore metabolic flexibility long term. And I am personally here to play the long game. Okay. So if there is a short period of that intense focus, what we get is one toggle, and our bodies adapt to that, and then they slow down, right? So this is where a lot of us have gotten metabolically stuck. We have pulled one of those toggles that I was talking about last week, and we have really just been stuck in one single toggle for a really long period of time. Even if you tiptoed into some other toggles every once in a while, if you really are stuck in one for a long period of time, or you keep going back to it, that's when we are actually kind of, we're adapting by slowing down and also not changing. So it's almost like a state of being frozen. And yes, I'm thinking like Anna and Elsa, frozen, right? We are like an ice cube. We are slow and cold. It's like putting your metabolism on ice. And that method just doesn't work in the long run, especially because the only toggle that usually is used to address metabolic flexibility, I'm not even gonna say flexibility, used to address metabolism is the eat less, exercise more toggle. So when we are constantly using that toggle, like I talked about last week, we're going to get really stuck and your body is going to really slow down metabolism. So that is why this week we are going to talk about really employing cycling to keep your metabolism flexible. So we want to keep you on track towards your goals, but we don't want to keep you crash landed in slow, frozen metabolic inflexibility, especially not for any long periods of time. So before we dive into that, I wanted to just go back and review what we have done so far, how we've gotten here. Because one of my very, very favorite sayings ever is little by little, a little becomes a lot, right? And this is also why we can't go into an all or nothing kind of state. When you just kind of try and do everything all at once, that is often where our mindset comes in and says, hell no, that is too much, I'm not doing it. We get into a state of overwhelm. And that's also a way that we get frozen in our minds and our mindset, right? So I really prefer this idea of just kind of little by little, a little becomes a lot, this exponential change, this snowball that I was talking about last week, where we really start to see some momentum building over time. You don't change everything all at once. You start building momentum over time. And over time, you find that you've developed this really flexible metabolism instead of being stuck in something that feels rigid and unchanging. All right, so getting us back into week one. So in week one, I introduced you to the 3 M's of metabolism. And this has really been kind of the structure that we've hung everything on the entire time. So those 3 M's, again, I'm just going to keep telling them to you. They are movement, mindset, and mitochondria. So even though we are going to talk about exercise a little bit more specifically this week, you know, because you've been with me this entire time, that when I am talking about movement, I am really just talking about that. I am talking about not being frozen. I'm talking about not being just laying on the couch. Movement, including things like walking, or as we learned last week, those non-exercise kinds of movement we do, even just things like getting up to go to the bathroom, getting a glass of water, fidgeting, all of those kind of natural movements that we might do. All of that is included in movement, and the really intentional movement we've been doing this entire time is walking. So we also got started with a basic food framework, and it was really focused on foods that are there to restore mitochondrial health. And the mitochondria, again, are just those little energy factories inside of your cells. So we talked about how those factories work, why we want to be providing them energy so that they can actually then produce energy for us and help our metabolic rate be humming along instead of really stuck. So we also talked about why mindset matters, and why the way that you think about things, the way you talk to yourself, the words that you use, all are really important, because this is actually what will govern whether or not you are able to take action on anything that I have suggested for you. So then in week 2, we headed straight for pleasure. And in the spirit of not white knuckling and not being rigid, you were encouraged to pick both food and non-food pleasures to support your mindset and stress management, and keeping this being something that is really sustainable for you. Then in week 3, we homed in on one of the primary hormones that tends to be a metabolic wrecker for women in particular, which is the stress hormone of cortisol. So we implemented some practices to start curtailing cortisol so that your metabolism can get back on track and into gear. Then in week 4, we got serious with checking into how your particular body responds to food. So knowing that there are ways that we can anticipate that most people's bodies will respond, but that your particular body is going to have its own unique metabolic fingerprint, and the way that it's going to respond is going to be unique to you. So we started with some of those simple experiments to discover which of the foods were working for you, how to combine foods to smooth out your blood sugar and support energy and even energy, and then how to begin customizing your program using the information that you got. And then finally, last week, we really got into that concept of metabolic toggle. So why that conventional paradigm that I was just talking about again at the beginning here of eat less, exercise more really fails so many women, and what we should be doing instead. And we started with this rest-based toggle focused on foods that are high in both satiety and nutrient density. And so that lands us here in week 6 and our final week. And so this week, what we're going to be learning is how to use cycles to support your metabolism and to develop that flexibility. So I really want you thinking about, if your metabolism was a tree, we want it to be like the flowing branches of a willow, not like a 100-year-old oak tree that isn't going anywhere, right? So lots to be admired in the beautiful 100-year-old oak tree, but it isn't really all that flexible, right? We want flexibility and that kind of flowing capacity, right? So to get us into that flexible thing, I wanted to just give you a quick review of the toggles that we covered last week. So remembering that there are 4 primary metabolic toggles, and the 2 that most of us are really used to are actually the ones that produce an overall situation of stress. And remembering that stress is going to be triggering cortisol and rigidity in our bodies. But those 2 that we are used to doing that are really all wrong are the eat less, exercise more strategy. So I think about this as the model that's like the high school reunion in 2 weeks, like, oh shit, gotta do something really fast, right? Let me kind of crash land for 2 weeks. That's the eat less, exercise more strategy. You're hitting the elliptical for 2 hours twice a day and you're not eating anything. Or the other method, which is kind of what we tend to rubber band back to when we have done too much of the other one, which is eat more, exercise less. And I call this the Netflix and chill model, right? So when we get to Netflix and chill, remembering that that's actually also a stressor on the body. So when we have too much input and we're really not amping up the output at all, even with something like walking, then again, it is too much stress because our bodies have to handle an excess amount of input, right? So either one of those strategies is going to create a stressor on the body, and in particular, going to put a lot of stress on those mitochondria, on those energy factories, so that they cannot work in an optimal way. So then we got into their opposites, which is actually where I want most women to be landing instead. So we're kind of thinking like, this is one side of the teeter-totter, the seesaw, I guess depending on where you live, and this is the other side. So the other side is the eat less, exercise less, but I'm really calling this rest and reset model, right? So resting the systems of your body, resting digestion, resting your metabolic function, resting your muscles. That is the rest and reset model. And then there's the eat more, exercise more model, which is the ramp up model. And we didn't get into that a lot last week. I am going to cover that more in detail this week. So that eat more, exercise more is the ramp up. It's also kind of just thinking about building, right? So we are in a build stage or we are in a rest stage, but we're never in an overwhelm stage, that's what we're trying to avoid, right? So last week we focused really on that eat less, exercise less. And now we are going to really talk about that eat more, exercise more. So whether or not you are currently doing more intense exercise, I want you to stay with me because we are going to handle how to deal with this in either circumstance. So either for someone who isn't currently doing very much exercise, or for someone who currently either has an exercise plan or is really going to the gym regularly, we're going to get both of you guys landed here, okay? So the first thing I want to do is just define what I am talking about when I'm talking about eating more and exercising more in that building stage, okay? So let's define this term. So what I am calling this ramp up period is we are going to be building things up. And for those of us who are in midlife, I want to make sure that a huge part of the exercise, when I'm talking about exercising more, is going to be things to develop your muscle tone, right? So we want to be doing weight lifting and weight bearing exercises that are going to really increase that metabolically active muscle tissue, right? So I'm going to also strongly encourage all of us in midlife. And when I say midlife, I mean past 35, you guys. Like, we don't have that many years to play around with this kind of gray zone cardio. So what I absolutely want you avoiding is this steady state gray zone cardio where you are kind of sort of getting your heart rate up, but you're doing it for a really long time. So this looks like going and hopping on a treadmill for an hour at kind of a moderate pace. Same thing with like an elliptical bike, anything where you just kind of hop on, get your heart rate up a little while, and then just stay in that state for a long time. Now, I'm not saying anything really about maybe the benefits to you from enjoyment. We're not talking about, just feeling like you're getting a little bit of cardiovascular support from that. It's always good to move your body, right? But we're looking to maximize our efforts here, right? Especially women in midlife, we don't have time to be spending doing things that aren't getting us to that optimal result level. So I call that steady state cardio your metabolic death zone, right? That is, we're really not achieving what we want to achieve metabolically by staying in that death zone. So instead, what you want to be doing is within each workout, you want to be getting to periods of full out high intensity, and you're not going to be able to sustain that for very long. So short periods, short bursts of intense activity followed by complete rest. Right. And this is within one period of exercise, right? So this isn't like one day you do super intense and one day you're resting. Like within your exercise plan, you're going full out, full rest, full out, full rest. We are not hanging out in the death zone of that gray zone, right? So what happens and why I am encouraging you to be doing this is that, especially for doing the really intense muscle building, what happens is that as early as age 35, we start losing our metabolically active tissue, which is our muscle primarily, and we start losing it really fast. So it can start to increase, and this is one of those snowballs that's going in the wrong direction for us. It can get up to 8% of that tissue gets lost every single decade. And you can see how this can compound over time really fast. So if you lost 8% between, in your 30s and 40s, and then all of a sudden, in your next decade, you lose 8% more, really rapidly, we are getting into a state of very low muscle mass and low muscle tone. So that goes really fast. And so to counteract that and preserve muscle, and here's why we want to preserve muscle. side note. We want to preserve muscle for everything from balance to bone health, to our metabolic function, and then quite honestly, aesthetics, right? We want to look like we are fit, but we actually want to be fit. And we need to focus our attention on preserving that muscle at the very least. And then of course, we can look at rebuilding anything that we've lost. So for sure, preserve at a minimum, and then it would be even metabolically more beneficial for you to be building that back up. So what we don't want to do is go from 0 to 60 if you are not currently exercising or working out. So what I'm not proposing is that you just go from being in that eat more, exercise less category to suddenly going and hitting the gym 6 days a week. That is also going to be an excessive stressor on the body, right? So we want to ramp up to this a little bit more slowly. So first, let's address that. Let's address that person, that woman who, if this is you, who hasn't been exercising very much. And then you guys who are working out more, we'll get to you next, right? So right now, if you are not doing what I'm going to call focused exercise, so this is, again, beyond walking. I am considering walking just like your baseline, sort of like getting nutrient-dense food is the baseline for nutrition, right? So baseline is just walking. This I'm not counting as exercise because this is really not aimed at getting your heart rate elevated. This is getting you moving. This is reducing cortisol. This is increasing insulin sensitivity. This isn't really for building muscle, right? So the walking is amazing, beneficial, the most important kind of just get up and go piece, but it's not going to really be building muscle. So let's say you're in that state. You've been getting your nutrition on point. You have been starting to walk. You could do two things. So you could, if you're this person, you could extend your reset phase, which is the eating less and exercising less and just resting state for your body. You could extend that phase for up to 12 weeks. Now, again, anything we do, you don't want to stay there forever because the longer you stay there, we start getting metabolic adaptation. Things start to slow down. You don't get results. That is not why we're here. We are here to get results, right? So you can extend that for up to a few months and still be getting results. If you keep going past that like 12-ish weeks, we start to see a downturn in your results and your benefits. And we're also not grabbing that metabolically active muscle tissue. So you can absolutely do that if you want, if that's the place you're at, wonderful. Stay there, get really reset over the next 12 weeks. If you feel like you've really gotten a handle on that and you're ready soon in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to start doing this opposite toggle of eating more and exercising more, then I would strongly encourage you to start experimenting with some body weight or lightly weighted exercise with the intention of building that muscle tone, right? So this is, again, not hopping on a cardio machine, not even running really, but I want you thinking about building muscle and adding that in, building up from maybe 2 or 3 times a week to going maybe to 3 or 4 times a week, and then eventually getting to like 4 to 6 times a week. But again, if you want to start playing with that, you're going to want to build up slowly. You're not going to want to go from 0 to 60. Don't go from not working out at all to suddenly hitting the gym 6 times a week. You're going to quit in a week after that, and no one's going to get any results from that. Okay. So this is how we start to cycle these things in. So you can either, again, kind of do that longer period of eat less, exercise less, or you can start to cycle in the eat more, exercise more at a pace that works for you. Now, we're going to talk about what it looks like specifically around the food and eating more in just a second. But I first want to talk to all of the women who are already working out. So if you're already working out, again, what you want to make sure that you are doing is shifting your focus if you haven't already. If you are one of these women who's already really hitting the weights hard, awesome. I'm going to teach you how to optimize that. If you are not, what I would say is if you are already exercising, but your exercise is much more cardio focused and you haven't put that focus onto onto weights, you're really going to want to shift your focus so that a majority of your workout time, and we can even be talking 55-45, but we want a majority of the time that you are exercising to be focused on building muscle, because that is our metabolically active tissue, and it's what you are naturally going to be losing the fastest if you're not putting any effort into that, right? So we want to shift away from any steady state cardio that you might be doing and shifting towards those more high intensity weight training type of sessions. So if you still want to do a particular kind of cardio that you love, so if you have some cardio that you're doing and you just love it, it makes you feel good, amazing. We're just shifting the focus so less of your time is spent doing that. We want to preserve that tissue. Okay, so how do we do this toggle of eating more and exercising more? So it's actually pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So in an eating more and exercising more toggle, again, what we are looking at is starting to build here. So we're trying to build this metabolically active tissue, and we're also starting to kind of put fuel in the fire of your metabolism, so it's burning a little bit brighter and faster, right? So you want to be exercising. When I am talking about exercising more, I mean that you are moving your body on purpose at higher intensity, at least 4 times per week, okay? So this is in addition to walking. I'm going to keep saying this. Walking is your baseline. Anything that we are doing above and beyond that, that's your exercise, but walking is foundational. It is baseline for everybody. So to fuel your muscle growth and metabolic recovery in this phase, we're also going to be stimulating our mitochondria instead of stunting them by increasing the amount of nutrients that we are giving the body, right? So in order to build anything, including muscle, we need more input. We need to be putting things in to be able to build. We can't build out of nothing. And our mitochondria will get extremely stressed if we are asking them to do more, or not actually putting more input in. So this is where we want to get a little bit more input. So specifically, here's what you want to do. You want to be encasing those workouts. You want to be putting a lot of nutrients, a lot of fuel in around those workouts. You want to be fueling your body appropriately, both to get the optimal output in that workout. So to have enough energy to go hard in the workout. And by hard, as hard as you want, right? Not everybody wants to do like crazy zone, but this is why the short periods of high intensity work. So you want to be able to make sure you have fuel, and then you want to have the repair work capacity afterwards. So specifically what you want to do is an hour or 2 before, and really I'm going to say for a lot of women, at least an hour and a half gives your body time to digest. So an hour or 2 before your heavier workouts, you want to be eating some additional carbohydrate before those workouts. So looking at, again, your high satiety, high nutrient dense foods, but also picking things that maybe typically would be considered a little bit lower on the satiety index, but they're still going to be giving you that quick energy. And so that might look like more starchy root vegetables, so things like potatoes and sweet potatoes. It might look like some of those starchier squashes, so like butternut squash, carrots, parsnips, all of those like root vegetable kind of carbohydrates, and then the sweeter fruit. So this is where we are looking to things like a tropical fruit, as opposed to the lower glycemic fruits like berries. So lower glycemic meaning you don't spike the blood sugar as much. We're going to hit the sweeter fruit, so things that taste a little bit sweeter, in that window, in that pocket, because that's going to give your body a little bit more of that fuel and that energy to really have a good workout and stimulate muscle growth. So an hour to an hour and a half before we are going to, an hour to 2 hours, and maybe, again, kind of thinking an hour and a half is maybe your sweet spot. We're going to have an extra 1 or 2 servings of carbohydrate. Now, this is, again, where you get to find out what's working for your own body. So you get to see how much of a serving you really need. If you have 2 servings, does it help you more than 1? Maybe only 1 is all that's necessary. We don't need to overfuel. We do want to give you enough. Similarly with timing, right? You might find that an hour and a half is just right. If you kind of start squeezing in on that hour, you might be getting a little bit sick because that food hasn't digested right? So you can play with how this works for your body. I'm just giving you some guidelines so that you can start to experiment. So we want to be able to, again, access the carbs that you're eating. So your body needs time to convert that into sugars that your muscles can then use for fuel. And we need that kind of, like I said, hour to hour and a half to get that going. And then what you're wanting to do after your workout is eat a pretty good serving of protein. Now, this is the one time I'm going to give you a number because it is rather specific. So we're looking for around 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes. That's pretty easy to remember because it's 2 30s, right? 30 minutes, 30 grams of protein, and that's going to help make sure that the stimulus you just got on those muscles is going to be actually able to, we're able to build that muscle tissue, right? So we got the stimulus from that exercise, and we want to be able to synthesize new muscle from that stimulus, right? All those S's in there, they're getting me. So we want to be able to rebuild that tissue, and so you need that protein in a really short window. Dudes have like a day and a half. It's totally not fair, but they got a long time period to get more protein on board. Women have 30 minutes. So 30 minutes, and we want 30 grams of protein right afterwards to really enhance that muscle building impact. Okay, so that is the very simple framework for the eating more, exercising more toggle. We're using a very similar baseline framework of high nutrient density, high satiety foods. We're adding in more carbs before an intense workout. We're adding more protein after, and we're increasing the frequency of those intense workouts. So the final piece for this week is talking about how to optimally cycle back and forth between these things. So I'm just going to keep talking about cycling and flexibility because that is the whole purpose of this entire anti-bootcamp, and particularly this capstone week. So if you're still getting your menstrual cycle, the best time to cycle into that ramp up toggle, so that eating more, exercising more, which again, I'm calling that ramp up phase, that building phase, is during the first half of your cycle. So you can start as soon as the first day that you're bleeding, if you feel up to it. Some women feel kind of ragged out on that first day or even that first couple of days, but within a couple of days, depending on your energy levels, so pay attention to your body, you can start that ramp up period. And then you can continue that ramp up till about halfway through your cycle, or maybe even a little bit beyond the halfway point, depending on your energy. So super, super tuning in and paying attention to how your body is feeling. So if your energy is still high and you're still having great sleep and you feel like you're really wanting to just, keep pushing through, you can keep going for that, few days, even close to a week past your mid-cycle. And at that point, you want to switch over to the toggle of the rest and reset. So eating a little bit less, exercising less. And so that is your resetting period of the cycle. Now, for those of you who have tracked or know a little bit more, this is the follicular phase and the luteal phase. But for everyone else, we're just talking kind of first half, second half, right? So at that point, during your rest and reset, you can still actually do up to 3 days of weights. So no intense cardio. You want to keep your weight sessions a little bit shorter, maybe focusing only on upper body or lower body, but you can still be getting in some of those weight sessions, again, up to about 3 times, depending on your energy during that lower intensity phase. But really the focus should be on the rest, the restoration, things like gentle yoga, things like a mat Pilates kind of class, doing some gentle swimming, not hardcore swimming. These are the kinds of things that you can be doing in that time frame. Now, if you are not cycling anymore, so your menstrual cycle is done, you can still follow a similar strategy. We still want to keep your metabolism flexible by keeping things shifting periodically, right? Anytime we keep things the same all the time, we are going to start getting rigid and inflexible, and we really want this suppleness, right? So if you're not cycling anymore, you can pick 2 or 3 weeks where you are going to ramp up, and then 1 or 2 weeks of rest and reset. So we're going to kind of still be following that same pattern, but there is some flexibility about when you want to do this. Some women enjoy doing something like following the cycles of the moon. So you can get out a calendar, you can look up where the moon cycles are. And this is kind of what women have done historically for, hundreds, if not thousands of years, which I think is pretty cool. So as the moon is waxing, so going from a new moon state towards a full moon state, this is your building state. This is your ramp up state, eating more, exercising more. And then as the moon is waning, going from a full moon towards a new moon, you can kind of similarly be going into that more relaxed state, eating less, exercising less, going into that reset. That's a fun way that you can kind of be in tune with nature's cycles while you are cycling for your own body. So then, just like riding on a seesaw or surfing on a wave, you continue to cycle through these periods where you are in a build phase, a ramp up phase, eating more, exercising more, and a ramp down, reset, rest kind of mode of exercising less and eating less. And always keeping your mind and your focus on those high satiety, high nutrient foods, like we introduced last week. Doesn't mean this is the only food you're ever going to eat, but it means that you keep your focus on those things because you know they are going to support your mitochondrial function, your metabolism long-term, right? And then as you continue to gradually kind of start learning to become more metabolically flexible, you can get more playful with experimenting and find out what works for you. So as you employ the cycle strategy, you are going to become more metabolically flexible. You will improve your metabolic health, including things like longevity and energy. And this is really fun, exciting stuff, y'all. So I sincerely hope that you have enjoyed the last 6 weeks. We have started to reset your metabolic flexibility. We've started to flood your energy factories, those mitochondria, with the nutrients that they might have been starving for. And we started to repair your mood, energy, and mojo. So congratulations on taking these steps for your future self. And the end of the Anti-Bootcamp is not a finish line, but rather a milestone. So your health journey and your metabolism, these are lifelong journeys that you are on. We are never the same every single day. We are constantly in a state of gradual change. So the last 6 weeks have really been a reset to get you back on track. And I hope that your body feels it. At the same time, to keep up with the progress you've made, you may want or need some extra support. And I want you to know that I've got you if you'd still like a guide along the way. So I'll be sending you a special invitation soon on how you can keep going if you want to on this journey, if you wish. In the meantime, have fun exploring your metabolic toggles, keep priming your body for pleasure, and have a wonderful